It's the 4-month sprint to the playoffs. Every Saturday, a potential upset. Every game, a career is on the line. From Heisman hopefuls to the college football playoff picture, we analyze the schemes, predict the winners, and dissect the gridlock that is the weekly rankings. If you want the deepest dive into college football, this is your ticket. Welcome to Gridiron Gridlock, an Empty the Bench Network exclusive. Starting now with your host, Trevor Williams.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of Gridiron Gridlocks. As Callan mentioned, Trevor Williams, we are back with some great college football for you guys today on New Year's Eve to build up the momentum, the excitement of all of the quarterfinal games happening today and tomorrow, as well as a couple games that have been happening on throughout the day here on New Year's Eve. Hopefully everyone's getting ready to go over to their New Year's Eve spots, getting their favorite appetizers, drinks, and etc. onto tonight's edition of Gridiron Gridlocks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of games have been happening on so far throughout all of college football today, ladies and gentlemen. The game that we've been looking at that already has been finished, ladies and gentlemen, is, before I reveal all that, you got to make sure you give us a follow for Gridiron Gridlocks. Hit up us on ETB, as well as my personal social media, as well as TWilly64, as well as ETB Network on your respective social medias. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into today's topic of conversation of the games that have already been concluded. We're taking a quick recap of Iowa and Vanderbilt, ladies and gentlemen. What a game that has been across college football today at the noon slate. We have Iowa getting 34 points, ladies and gentlemen, compared to Vanderbilt's 27 in this mix, ladies and gentlemen. Iowa's defense stood tall when it mattered the most, held Vanderbilt to 3 points by half, so the score was 14-3. And from there, Vanderbilt started putting on the pressure, but it was a little too late in the fourth quarter when things started changing for Vanderbilt and their hope and future to win in this football game. Diego had a great night, ladies and gentlemen. 2 touchdown passes and 347 yards passing compared to Mark Gronkowski's 212 passing yards to 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. You see that 1 interception, ladies and gentlemen, didn't really have a huge impact of Iowa taking care of victory in this one, ladies and gentlemen. But what a great way to start off college football on this great rendition of college football. But if you look across the board on the whole receiving and game breakdown for it, I mean, the teams were fairly matched for like rushing yards and along those lines. But if we're looking at like team stats, ladies and gentlemen, as my Fitbit my Kindle kind of helps me with that. I mean, looking at the passing yards, total offensive yards across the board, Vanderbilt almost had 400. They had 398 yards compared to Iowa's 379 total yards of offense. You had turnovers, 1 for Iowa, as I mentioned earlier, but the penalties is what hurt Vanderbilt. Iowa had 5 penalties for 53 yards, ladies and gentlemen, compared to Vanderbilt's 10 penalties for 53 yards as well. Those 10 penalties really messed up the clock for Vanderbilt and kind of changed everything. But that Iowa front, ladies and gentlemen, held Vanderbilt to 51 yards of rushing, ladies and gentlemen. 51 yards. That's how good the Iowa Hawkeyes defense is, just shutting down teams across the board. But then you look at what Vanderbilt had to go through. They allowed 167 yards rushing right there, ladies and gentlemen. That is a little bit some Big Ten football action at its finest, where Iowa was just pounding the rock down Vanderbilt without any hesitations across the board, ladies and gentlemen. It's one of those magnificent moments that you can witness within college football. Before I go into the next game that's kind of underway, Michigan and Texas, we'll look at some of the games and stats for that leading up to that, ladies and gentlemen. So let's take a quick peek right now for Michigan and Texas. I know it's not a quick of a recap since the game's underway right now. Right now, we are at 5:38 in the third quarter, ladies and gentlemen, of Michigan and Texas. The score is now 24-20 in this game. Can Michigan roll back this victory in it? Looking at the leaders right now, Arch Manning, 166 yards passing with a completion of 17 for 27 with 1 passing touchdown, where Bryce Underwood is 13 for 22 with 2 passing touchdowns in this mix, ladies and gentlemen. Such a barn burner that we got going on in the Citrus Cheez-It Bowl, ladies and gentlemen. I know that mascots have been very prevalent in the Pop-Tart Bowl. I know Cheez-It has done the same thing with their mascots. So we're getting a lot of mascots in bowl mania for the most part, ladies and gentlemen. But as we look at Texas and Michigan, the first half score was about 17-17 at half across the board. Michigan was up in the first quarter 10-3, but Texas makes a surge in the second, changing it to in the second half quarter to 7-14. And that's how we got a total of 17 all at half. And now we look at it across the board, ladies and gentlemen, to now for the third quarter score of 3-7, which brings us a grand total of 20-24 right now. Very good game. So if you're not watching that right now, definitely tune in to look at that one. And the win probability for Texas right now is about a 68.3% chance of victory compared to Michigan's right now of a 31.7 chance of victory. So very good across the board, as you can see. But as time keeps marching down, the victory for Texas starts to grow large and very significant across the board in that one, ladies and gentlemen. But if we look at that, Texas had, capitalized on the turnovers. Very successful fourth down for both programs right now. Michigan is 2 for 2 and Texas is 1 for 1. Third downs, not too, savvy. Michigan is 3 for 10 and Texas is 3 for 8 across for third downs. First down, Texas is dominating across the board for 19 for 12, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what we're kind of seeing across the board on all the stats. Let's take a quick look at this team stats, what we got cooking for the most part for this game, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Texas looking, like I said, beautiful across the board, but I don't think the team stats are pulling up quite yet. Nice. Nope. They're not. Yep, there we go. Team stats are now pulling. Nope, it's not letting me see the team stats on my Kindle, ladies and gentlemen. So without maybe we can check the box score to see if that might help us out. Yep, looking at the box score right now, Arch Manning's now at 175. I think he's going to probably finish maybe close to like 300. Maybe he hits 317, 311. But I think he's probably going to cap at like 295 on how this is going to run it. I think Texas is going to rely on the rushing game right now because Christian Clark has already 80 yards rushing with 1 TD with 13 attempts at the carry. And for the most part, so I think they're just going to rely on him pounding the rock to make sure that makes a difference in that one. So make sure you tune that into that one, ladies and gentlemen. The Citrus Cheez-It Bowl. Right now, I think it's getting more closer past 5:38 into this game, and it's on ABC. I know we got a lot of games that we start looking at, so we're going to start with the New Year's Day games to build us into the momentum of the New Year's Eve game, ladies and gentlemen, which is Ohio State and Miami. A lot of great breakdown analysis for the most part. So let's start it off at the top of the day on New Year's Eve. Once you get off of your god-awful hangovers and decide to say, hey, we got college football today. And the first game on the record books, ladies and gentlemen, it is the Orange Bowl, Oregon, Texas Tech, noon Eastern time, New Year's Day, ladies and gentlemen. What a game we got for this one. I think it's a perfect game to kick us off, to start off the new year. A hard-nosed Texas Tech defense versus the high-flying Oregon Ducks with their high-powered offense that can be sluggish at times, but once it gets rolling, it becomes very dangerous to stop. So Texas Tech's name of the game, keep Oregon's offense off the field and manage this clock, because they know that Oregon can score it within a moment's notice, and it will kind of unravel the plans of Texas Tech. With their, I would say, progression, Oregon's defense backed off in the James Madison game, giving up 34 points, but at the same time, Oregon was very dominant from the start of the game, and they'll probably put their backups into rest. Those individuals from that, I wouldn't say miscellaneous injuries that could occur during that bowl game, but that's kind of where they were at, taking care of business, get that home victory, and now play a very aggressive Texas Tech team that's trying to make a statement, because they've been phenomenal all year in this one, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, you can catch the Orange Bowl at noon on ESPN, building up for that momentum for the games later on in the day. Now, what Oregon has to do in this matchup, ladies and gentlemen, is they can't stall, and they can't give Texas Tech short field. They have to make long drives, make sure they wear down this Texas Tech defense. I think if they can wear down this Texas Tech defense or get out to an early lead, and if they have to stall, then they're fine. They're the ones that are controlling their own destiny in this one, ladies and gentlemen. Oregon has to play focus and discipline football across the board. They will have to manage what they need to manage. They can't look past Texas Tech, even though getting their chomps back at Indiana if they can survive the Rose Bowl against Alabama is what Oregon's going after. They want to get back to the national championship game. They want to be there facing Ohio State or facing Georgia. They want to be in that conversation. They are a program that has the most flashiest uniforms, but no national championship. They have won the Big Ten last year. They missed out on it because they lose to Indiana, and now they have a chance to win a national championship. Win your conference doesn't mean you win the national championship. We've seen that with Ohio State, and Oregon's trying to do the same thing. They said, sure, it's great that they won the Big Ten championship game that last year, but now they have a cusp of doing something fantastic for their program. It's not easy. It's not an easy taskway to go down, beat Texas Tech, then trying to find a way to get over a mental hurdle of saying, we lost to Indiana at home, but now we're in the semifinals, I think in the Peach and Fiesta Bowl, for what's going to be lined up for them. I think they're going to ways to win this bowl game very fast, but they don't want Oregon to linger around. I think that's what Oregon has to do. Make sure Texas Tech doesn't linger around, and they can secure the victory for the most part without pretty much any trouble that will kind of hinder them going into this matchup. So it's really hard to say what we're going to see from this Texas Tech offense. Defense, I feel like they're ready to go, ready to lock and load and take care of business. So that's where my stance, where my take is for the most part. And I want to give you an update with the Texas game right now. It's 3:44 in the third, and it's about, Michigan has the ball on Texas's 15, so Michigan's about to score. But that's kind of where the Orange – who do you think is going to end up winning this bowl game for the most part? So keep me posted on what you got. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go into the Rose Bowl, lining it up for ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. So in the Rose Bowl, we got Alabama in Indiana 4 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN, New Year's Day, ladies and gentlemen. Indiana. I know I've been talking about other times on Gridiron Gridlock, but ladies and gentlemen, this Indiana team is trying to be legit. I'm worried that they might have a hangover victory of knocking off Ohio State and not playing and having that bye week. I know Coach Sargnetti is finding a way to rally the troops, have them be focused, and have them lock in. But it's one of those things that we have to watch. They know they can't beat Alabama talent-wise. That's what they know. But they have to keep that offense off the field and wear down that defense. They have to find a way to play Big Ten football, but play to their strengths and not make mental mistakes to give Alabama a chance to come back and poise. We saw what happened to the Oklahoma game, where Oklahoma was up 17-0, and then the mistakes started to happen. The mistakes, an interception on their side of the field gave Alabama a short field, quick score, and Alabama just started to chip away slowly but surely to knock them out of contention. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of those critical moments as a team. You can't do silly mistakes on these big games. The thing I'm worried about with outside of that is Pasadena in the Rose Bowl for Indiana. These players haven't been to this stage, to this magnitude. Yes, they play big games with Oregon and Ohio State. So they have those chips on the shoulder for that. But can they play an Alabama team that wants to be physical, like Indiana can, but also manage the clock well, knows how to drive a game-winning drive when they need to? Can Indiana's defense do it? Can they apply pressure? If they apply pressure to Alabama's quarterback, they have a chance to win this football game. I don't think it's going to be an easy task. It's not going to be a fun task, but it's going to be a task that they have to find a way to drive down the field and get that huge victory to their magnitude. So now Alabama's game plan is run them out of the Rose Bowl. Put all the pressure, wear them out, make them turn this into a track meet. Just keep scoring, keep applying the pressure, and Indiana will fold. You're going up against a Heisman Trophy winner. He is a Heisman Trophy winner for a reason, Mendoza. He find his way to win game-winning drive. He can do a 2-minute drill. We saw that at Penn State. He's, I would say, an all-around Heisman Trophy who embodies the Heisman Trophy characteristics. Now can you live up to that expectation? In Pasadena, when the sun starts to set over the mountains in the background of this great stadium, in the granddaddy of them all, will Mendoza's spirits ring true? Can his stardom rise up to the occasion? Is it enough for them? Or are they going to fall short where he throws a late interception and his season is written in the stars and his great, I wouldn't say Cinderella, his campaign comes short and doesn't bring Indiana a national title appearance? He has the dream. He has the ability. If he beats Alabama and has Oregon again, I guarantee you they will feel confident to reach the national championship. Them facing Texas Tech, ladies and gentlemen, is something that they would have to face. A very aggressive defense. They did that with Ohio State. They find a way to get the ball down the field and create momentum for the momentous occasion for that, ladies and gentlemen. But they need to find ways to win this football game. They have to be off the line of scrimmage. They have to make Alabama have costly penalties, holding penalties, pass interference calls, delay of game even to do it. And people are flying from Indiana to be in this moment because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for this program to do it, to drive the dream, the momentum, the energy that you build for Indiana going up against Alabama. It's a stepping stone for them in this campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think about Alabama, Indiana. People saying Indiana is a legit team right now. They got over their big win over Oregon. They survived their Cinderella almost upset with Penn State, and they knocked off Ohio State with a 3-point victory. It's there, ladies and gentlemen. They are 2 steps away from being not 2 steps, 3 steps away from possibly being a national championship. But they have to take one game at a time, 1 quarter at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 second. And they could be a Rose Bowl champion. Now, let's kind of start diving in to the other game, ladies and gentlemen. Ole Miss and the Sugar Bowl. Nothing is sweeter than the Sugar Bowl. You may thought orange was sweet. The smell of a rose was sweet. But you are about to enter the Sugar Bowl with Ole Miss and Georgia. 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN on New Year's Day, ladies and gentlemen. A game that Georgia wants to win down in New Orleans in this great matchup, ladies and gentlemen. The home of the Big Easy, where you have the nice, Mardi Gras, the big old jazz band, the big band, the swing. Can Georgia swing their way to the semifinals, or will Ole Miss be a spoiler to ruin their chances of being a Sugar Bowl champion? Ole Miss, not looking too pretty, but took care of business against Tulane. 41-10, ladies and gentlemen. But Ole Miss, 12-1 champion. Not champion, but a team, compared to the SEC champion of Georgia, whose only loss was to Alabama, and they revenged that loss in a 3-possession margin of victory in the SEC championship game. Very, very solid performance across the board, ladies and gentlemen. Now, for Georgia to win this game, they have to play physical, which they always do. They need to put pressure on Ole Miss since they don't have Lane Kiffin as at the helm. I think Lane Kiffin, but if Ole Miss beats Georgia and goes on and beats Ohio State, gets the national championship, it would look so bad for Lane Kiffin for possibly leaving a national championship team when they were on the campaign of winning it all. I don't know what to tell you with that, ladies and gentlemen. But it's like America loves a good underdog. And Ole Miss is there, same with Indiana, but Indiana's a favorite right now. America's rooting for Indiana, but they probably have a close second with Ole Miss in this scenario with what they've been going through. Now, with Georgia, who's a 3 seed, may start look past Ole Miss a little bit, think about Ohio State and how they're going to perform on New Year's Eve. But like I said, Kirby Smart is a smart man, not pun intended in that one, ladies and gentlemen. You can throw all your haws and laps and all of that in the comment section. But what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen, is the dogs. The dogs are trying to go to the Fiesta Bowl and party on next week in that scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Not an easy task, but a task that they are willing to be at the plate to take care of business and get a nice victory in that sense for the most part. But the chance of victory for Georgia in this one, ladies and gentlemen, is a 61.1% chance of victory. And if you look at Ole Miss, ladies and gentlemen, they have a 39.9% chance of victory in this scenario. You're looking at the spread. Georgia's -6 in the scenario. But if you go with the money line for Ole Miss, it's plus 200 across the overall scenario. But I want to see if we can see some stats to help us paint a prettier picture for this regulation for the scenario. Stockton, 5 interceptions of the season with 23 passing touchdowns with 2,691 yards, compared to Ole Miss's quarterback, 3 interceptions, 19 touchdowns with 3,298 yards of passing, ladies and gentlemen. What a game that we could have. But the thing is, Georgia likes short fields with that defense, creating the turnovers, all that momentum leading up to it, knocking out Texas 35-10. But if you look at, we're going to use like the eye test a little bit with a common opponent with Mississippi State. Ole Miss beat Mississippi State 38-19. But if you flip the script a little bit, Georgia beat Mississippi State 41-21. So relatively close with margins of victory. So we could get a very interesting close game. But like I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, Georgia will create the turnovers to give their offense a short field and keep Ole Miss at bay the entire game, put the pressure up front, get in Ole Miss's quarterback's face, make them make risky decisions and overthrow balls to give the Georgia D-backs a chance to pick it off and change the landscape of this game, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of momentum going up into it, a lot of things that we have to decide what's going to unravel to it. Ole Miss's game plan is you got to score when you got to score. You can't stall on going into the red zone. You got to get your points because Georgia will get their points. So that's what it is. It's not going to be a boat race, but it's going to feel like a boat race because Georgia is going to put on the pressure and it'll be all gas, no brakes going into this one, ladies and gentlemen. So that's my take on the Glory's Sugar Bowl. Like I said, nothing sweeter than the Sugar Bowl. Nothing smells sweeter than the rolls, but nothing tastes. I would say the second taste is between a Georgia and a peach. Not a Georgia and a peach, an orange and a peach. So that's where we are. But now let's get down to the game of the evening, ladies and gentlemen. The game that we're all talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is nothing is softer than a bowl of cotton in the Cotton Bowl, ladies and gentlemen. Cotton Bowl, it ain't soft. It's hard-nosed football in the gridiron with Ohio State, Miami. The defenses are the topic of discussion. Can Miami's defense keep Jeremiah Smith at bay in this scenario, ladies and gentlemen? That is the question that we have. Can Julian Sayin find ways to keep the Buckeyes offense marching down this field, or will he face a similar thing that we saw when he faced Indiana? His drives were stalling out, not be able to convert for those 4th and 1s when it mattered the most. Can Ohio State kicker make a field goal? And on New Year's Eve, we've seen this script before. Ohio State plays New Year's. They lose to Georgia by a last-second field goal, and the ball hits 0, and Ohio State misses the kick. It times up perfectly. Ohio State teams will know this. Fans know it, and they are worried about this on New Year's Eve. The game's at 7:30, so it's not going to push us up close to the ball drop, but it's going to feel that pressure. But also when Ohio State plays on New Year's, it's not easy. We see what happened. They played Clemson on New Year's and got beat 31-0 in that fashion. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, with how we build up that momentum for Ohio State to go into this game tonight, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of things that are being broken down into this. Does Carson Beck get too much pressure from the Ohio State front 7? Can they do that? Can the linebackers get around? Can the defensive ends contain him so he doesn't roll out of the pocket? Right now, the cheapest ticket to get into the Cotton Bowl tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is $33. So if you're down in Texas right now at the AT&T Stadium, or also known as Jerry's World, you can get in for $33. So after taxes and all that stuff, you can probably get in, probably close to 44. But let me go to the Game Time app and see what I can get in for the Cotton Bowl for Ohio State tonight. So let's go on to that. Oh, like I said, including fees tonight, ladies and gentlemen, the cheapest ticket, including fees, is in the upper bowl in section 411, row 25 is the cheapest seat right now with $34 tonight. So it's fairly easy to get in tonight. Lower bowl, I would say, I see lower tickets for a single person. I see 185, not too shabby. I see 156. So if you have not made your New Year's plans, you're about 90 minutes from kickoff. You have enough time to get to the AT&T Stadium and purchase your ticket to attend tonight's game between Ohio State and Miami. Now, as we look at this, ladies and gentlemen, Miami beats Texas A&M 10-3. Yes, there was win in that game. Yes, it was not easy task for Miami to do it. But Miami had opportunities to score now, ladies and gentlemen. Opportunities that they can't mess up in this game. Ohio State will find ways to score. They can score lightning fast, and they can stop the storm that Miami can bring. The hurricane will dissipate, and there will be a little Buckeye tree starting to sprout to start Ohio State's campaign in the college football playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. Looking relatively easy in that front along that lines. But Ohio State only lost to the number one team in the nation by Indiana to 3 points. Julian Sayin, great season across the board. 31 touchdowns, 6 interceptions with 3,323 yards passing. And you have Carson Beck, who has 3,175 yards passing this season, 26 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. This man will throw an interception tonight. I guarantee you he will throw an interception that will unravel this game for him. And he will be on the sideline asking Coach, bring me back to reality. I just done messed up in the Cotton Bowl, and it's getting way too big for me. Like, that's what he needs. He needs to focus and lock in. That's what he has to do. But Jeremiah Smith, he's the guy that's in topic of conversation. The receiving core for Ohio State is going to be there. It's going to be present. You can't run man-to-man coverage, but that's what they're going to have to do. You're going to need a lot of pressure on Julian Sayin. If you can create the pressure, it will kind of eliminate Jeremiah Smith because it will shorten his route a little bit, but he's a speed demon. And I know there was also topics of conversation. If Miami was in a better spot than they were trying to recruit him, he said he would have gone to Miami. So it's one of those moments where it's like, if Miami was a better football team, they could have got top talent in Jeremiah Smith. And they can certainly do that by knocking off Ohio State tonight. It will put that program on the map and building Miami back to the golden standard that it once was going into, the early 2000s, and Ohio State find a way to knock them off in that national championship run in 2000. Now, the defense for Ohio State has been rock solid all year round. Like, look at all the scores for Ohio State. Like, we're just gonna look at the last 5 games. Indiana 13, Michigan 9, Rutgers 9, UCLA 10, Purdue 10. Like, I'm just gonna keep going down the score from Purdue, ladies and gentlemen, if it's gonna allow me. But let's just start at the season. Oh, they've held Texas to 7 points. They held Grambling to 0. They held Ohio to 9. They held Washington to 6. Minnesota to 3. Illinois 16. Wisconsin 0. Penn State 14. Purdue, like I said, was 10. This Ohio State team is preventing teams from getting into the 20s. That's what kind of defense we're dealing with Ohio State tonight. And Miami will struggle. They need their defense to create turnovers. It's one of those things that we're seeing. But with Miami's defense, ladies and gentlemen, they too have some pretty impressive stat lines. They held Notre Dame, who got left out in the college football playoffs, to 24 points. Again, a team that could have been in the playoffs. Then they played a small school, held them to 3. South Florida to 12 points. Florida to 7 points. Florida to 22. They lose to Louisville gave up 24. Held Stanford to 7. Held SMU, loses to SMU to 26. And held Syracuse to 10 points. NC State to 7. Virginia Tech to 17. Pitt to 7. And Texas A&M, who has a high-powered offense, to 3 points. So as you can see, the defense is the story, like I said, the story of what we got going on. And the quarterfinal, it's the magnitude. Can Carson Beck stay cool, calm, and collected? The spread is -7.5 for Ohio State in this scenario. But is Julian Sayin, can he knock off I won't say that, not the shyness, but the magnitude of a stage like this. Losing the Big Ten championship game was there, but then you have the scenario, was Ryan Day using all the tricks up his sleeve? Probably not. But letting Indiana do that to you on the Big Ten championship stage, it definitely does hurt. It does a mental block for a lot of players like that. But they know they have the talent. They know they have the ability to win and so forth for the most part. But I think Julian Saban will knock the dust off his shoulders. He'll play short ball, keep the drives long, and make sure Miami doesn't have a chance to get onto that field. I think they have an Ohio State game plan. They're going to stay focused. If they're not disciplined, it's going to be a long game. They can't have those silly mistakes, especially delay of games. I've seen Ohio State's teams in the past where they have delay of games, and it kills so many drives. I cannot wrap my head around how many times I watch Ohio State football games and watch them get a delay of game and they go 3 and out because of that, or a holding penalty. Now it's 1st and 20, and now they are punting 3 plays later. Like I said, it is the mental roadblock for Ohio State. Mistake-free football, play the best of your ability, and that's that. Nothing else needs to be said for that. Miami, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, they need to find a way to keep the Ohio State offense at bay. They can't give up the big plays. They're going to try to keep Ohio State to the first down marker. That's how they're going to do it, which is going to give Ohio State long drives, which is going to eat up the clock, which then keeps snowballing down to later in the game where we might have a game that is like 17-10. But I think the halftime score is probably going to be 17-10 or 17-7, but Ohio State will find a way to elongate that score. I think Ohio State will get 34 points and probably held Miami to maybe 17 points. And that late 17 will probably be late in the fourth quarter and a garbage time TD in that sense. That's how this game is going to run. That's how the magnitude is going to be. Ladies and gentlemen, I think Ohio State will take care of business going into that momentum, building up that momentum to set up a good campaign against Georgia in the Fiesta Bowl in Arizona. They just keep moving west until you get back to Florida for the national championship game. So they're basically almost playing in every time zone possible outside of California. I mean, it's very doable. I mean, Indiana's going the opposite, you know. They go from the West Coast to the East Coast and staying on the East Coast. And, I mean, it's there. It's for Ohio State for the taking. They got to be disciplined. And if they can do that, they're going to be Cotton Bowl champions. Like I said, this is not going to be soft like how Cotton is. It's definitely going to be a game that's going to have you on the edge of your seats from start to finish. And hopefully we get a nice thriller all the way down to the wire. But me being an Ohio State fan, I want a victory. I don't want to be stressing out where it's like Miami's coming back. Oh, no, here they go. They got another interception. They're bringing themselves back into this game. Like, it can easily happen like that. It's a snap like that, and it will change how the late games go. Ohio State basically has to do what they did against Tennessee and what they did to Oregon last year. Come out swinging, put the points on the board first, and just keep that margin, that 2-possession to 3-possession margin the entire game, and you walk out with the victory. Easy said, then done, ladies and gentlemen. That is what we got going on for tonight in the New Year's Eve games, ladies and gentlemen. So before we get down to other topics of discussion, let's see how the other games going on tonight for the most part. And looks like, further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Arizona State looks like they're not going to be able to survive the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl against Duke. It's about 1 minute and 47 seconds left in the game. Duke has the ball. Looks like it might be changing of possessions or stuff like that. Score is 42-39. Duke is. Michigan did score, but looks like, ladies and gentlemen, the game is over for the most part. 33 seconds left in the fourth with Michigan with 26, Texas to 24 points, ladies and gentlemen. not too looking good for my picks when I had those for my other show. Nebraska, ladies and gentlemen, fell short in the third, but they're rallying through to be almost getting close to the beginning of the fourth quarter, ladies and gentlemen, with Utah up 38-14 for the most part, ladies and gentlemen. Outside of that, the coaching carousel has been getting underway. There's been a few coaching hires and coaching decisions, which we'll like to break this down for the most part. The first one is this. There was talks that Marcus Freeman could have gone to the NFL, but he did come out saying that he's staying at Notre Dame for the next season. Now, that does bring a question to this, ladies and gentlemen. If Notre Dame wins the national championship game next year, does Marcus Freeman leave Notre Dame and go to the NFL? I think he likes to, every coach has a dream to coach in the NFL at some point. But for Marcus Freeman, maybe he likes coaching young men and mentoring them so they can be the best version of themselves, so they can be a good member of society. That's every coach's dream in college, making sure that they coach good young men to be good mentors, good father figures, good leaders in the roles that they take on after college. That's what a college coach wants to do. And that's what Marcus Freeman wants to do for the Notre Dame program. But he needs to find a way to get back to the playoffs and get back to the national championship game. He can build a squad to do it. I believe that he certainly can do it, but he needs to stop losing games where it puts him in a jeopardy situation of being left out of the college football playoffs. I think my ESPN had a glitch, and it looks like Michigan has more time early in the fourth. So sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. It's about 10:56, it looks like, left in that game. Might be. But Marcus Freeman, them opting out of the bowl game, I completely understand that. And being left out, which what Florida State should have did when they got left out for going undefeated, instead of playing and getting embarrassed to Georgia. I would have played and tried to beat Georgia, but when you have so many players opting in and out, it's his own story. But now, Marcus Freeman, is he on the hot seat for not making the playoffs? Is that his fault? I don't think so. If Notre Dame joins the conference I think they should join. You mean the Big Ten makes sense, but the Big Ten is too saturated with so many teams, and you could be a one-loss team and you don't play in your conference championship, and you could still possibly be left out. Now, granted, they could win and be a one-loss team and still get in. It's very possible. But for them, the conference that makes the most sense for them to be in the playoffs almost year in and year out is the ACC. They can beat Miami. Well, they didn't beat Miami this year, but they can beat Florida State. They can beat a lot of those teams. They can beat North Carolina. They can beat Louisville. They can do things that they can do. They can beat Pitt. They can beat all those teams, ladies and gentlemen. They can beat Boston College. Like they can do. They can beat Stanford. They can do it. But they're going to lose games that they shouldn't, which hurts them every year. If they can run the table and get a conference, they win that conference 7 out of 10 times. It's going to be Notre Dame's. Outside of recruiting classes and stuff like that, they might have a tough game against Clemson and they get left out because they have the head-to-head loss to Clemson. Or they lose to like a Florida State when they're on the up and up. But like I said, it's a minimum 2 to 1 losses per year. If not, you have an undefeated season. It looks pretty darn good for the most part for Notre Dame if they join the ACC. And with Marcus Freeman staying there, makes perfect sense if they join that conference. Now, they won't join that conference, and everyone's going to get on them about not joining that conference. But let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen. It is what it is. Notre Dame's probably never going to join a conference. Only thing they're going to join is the Big Ten because that's where the most money is outside the SEC, and they will never join the SEC. Let's make that clear. So that will put Marcus Freeman where he is for that. But also, Michigan ends up hiring Kyle Whittingham. He used to coach at Utah, and we saw what he did with Utah with some of those great teams that he has put together over the span over the time that he's been at Utah. He was a defensive coordinator underneath Urban Meyer when he was at Utah. So he has very good recollection on top of that for the most part for that, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, and I think Kirsty Wilson said it best, going on top of like the comment that the Big Ten is way too crowded. I agree with that statement as well. But going back to Michigan in the Big Ten, does Kyle Whittingham have what it takes to coach Michigan? He built a great defense at Utah for the last few years and put Ohio State with their second string in the Rose Bowl to the wire. But he's also won Pac-12 championships with Utah, messing up USC's prediction and stuff like that. He has built a good defensive program, and Michigan is a defensive school. So I think that's on the right track, keeping that Michigan hard-nosed football that they come to love. But can he build that an offense to go toe-to-toe with Ohio State for them to score? I think that's what they need to do. They need to get an offensive coordinator to get them on the right track, to build that right momentum, to keep things going in the Michigan standard. He will definitely upheld the Michigan standard outside of what has been going on with that program. I think he can definitely right-sides that ship to get them back into the college football playoffs, if not to the Big Ten championship game. But he knows what he has to do on the checklist. Beat Ohio State at Ohio State next year. Let's make that. He's going to try to do that. After that is get to the Big Ten championship, but that's not there. He needs to win national championships at Michigan. It is a blue blood. It is the Michigan way. It is the Michigan standard. Beat Ohio State, win a national championship. That's in meta, right? That's what we're doing here at the University of Michigan. Now, what does he need to do to turn this program around? Top of that, ladies and gentlemen, it's tough to wrap your head around of what they got going on. And he has big shoes and big corrections to correct to make it make sense, ladies and gentlemen. Now, he's going to start small. He's got to get Michigan to a 10-win season or 11-win season. That's the first things first. He needs to get, in my opinion, he has 2 to, I would say more 3 years to beat Ohio State. 3 to 4 years to beat Ohio State. We're going to get too upset with him losing to Ohio State and winning the national championship in that same year. I think that's what we can go with for the most part. Now, granted, you can think that, not winning the Big Ten and all that stuff will hurt him. I think if he wins a couple national championships within the remaining part of the decade or in the early parts of the 2030s, you got something there for the most part. But he's got to get his coaching staff in, got to get the recruiting right. So this offseason is going to be very critical to get the right recruiting class into the University of Michigan. And I think he's definitely going to build the defense first and then slowly start working on the offense. I don't know if Bryce Underwood stays at Michigan with getting a new head coach. We'll see what that I would say shakes itself out. But definitely something for us to keep a close watch in the offseason. But there was also another coaching hire that was huge, that Chip Kelly is going to be the offensive coordinator at Northwestern. After failing out the Raiders miserably and what ended up happening, but leaving the national championship Buckeyes, he's now the offensive coordinator at Northwestern. The question is, what is Northwestern doing? Is he going to become the next head coach at Northwestern in a couple seasons? I mean, he coached at Oregon as a head coach. He coached at UCLA as head coach and couldn't do much with that. But the thing is, Northwestern can't get the talents. So for him, this was a terrible move for the most part. It is quite a bit of a head scratcher because you can't really get much of a 5-star talent into Northwestern. And the more I think about it, it's the more insane approach. He could have gone anywhere else in the country. He could have been the head coach at Michigan for all we know. But no, that didn't happen. He's now the offensive coordinator at Michigan. If he was the offensive coordinator at Michigan, that would be huge. I think he could be able to get the offense he needs to build a great receiving core at Michigan, get a good running back, almost be like what he did when he was in Philadelphia with the Eagles, build a star-studded team. You can't do that at Northwestern. You can't compete with Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Washington, with the recruiting class. And on top of that, you got to deal with Iowa trying to build an offensive line and Nebraska too. They got defense locked down and secure. And then you got Minnesota causing some pandemonium. He's really put himself in a pigeonhole. I really don't know what Northwestern's doing. Yes, it's a great brand name, but you're not going to get what? You might get a few 5-star talents. You might get 2 to 3, but it's not enough to turn that offense around. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. It is tough. Like I said, it is tough to put this program to where it is. Yes, they got a new stadium in the process of getting a new stadium. Maybe that's what they're looking for, looking at the hopes and dreams of building this program up. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's not one of those things that we are too thrilled about. I think they might get an 8-4 season. They might get a 7-5 appearance. It's really nothing special, but it is definitely going to be a close eye. Maybe they get a rank getting Chip Kelly as an offensive coordinator. Maybe they sit at 24, 25 going into the next season, and that might be enough to build a momentum to get to what they need to going up for the most part, ladies and gentlemen. But that's where it stands. Does Northwestern get that talent they need to become a threat in the Big Ten? Or it's just a flashy hire to try to attract recruits, and it's really not going to do that for the most part. As we start winding down in tonight's program with 8 minutes left and the game almost about 98 minutes away from kickoff, and we all know it's not going to start at 7:30. It's probably going to start at 7:45 with the whole build up the momentum, the whole TV shenanigans and all that stuff. But it is one of those things that we start to look at with Northwestern. They have their beautiful black and gold uniforms, which is quite nice. Are they going to play at Wrigley Field again next season? I like it. It's a nice little classic. I mean, it's not too far for the students to hop on a train to get there, or a couple Uber rides to a train station. So it is manageable. It is doable to get students to Wrigley Field to play at the stadium, get a nice classic going against other Big Ten opponents. But, ladies and gentlemen, Northwestern in this coaching decision, just throw your thoughts in the comments section, and we'll read them for the next show, where we think this is going to go on how Northwestern, all the other coaching decisions that's going to end up unfolding for, if not the Big Ten, as well as Notre Dame for their season coming up. Now, I did throw this topic of conversation that we do see at the start of like week 0. We have a college football game that goes to Ireland every year. Now, that brings me to my next question. Will we ever see a bowl games be moved overseas? The NFL has a lot of games that are played in other countries, but will we see a college bowl game played overseas? Tickets would be extremely expensive. I just want to have like a fun for thought. I know it probably won't happen. You got to get a great deal for fan bases to do that. I do like Ireland. We get a nice little Irish bowl game out of that. But does that change? Do we get other bowl games? Will we see college football playoff games be played overseas if we have an expansion playoffs? That will change how teams game plan and appear in national championships. It's one of those interesting things that bowl games don't have value, but it also helps players to relax and some seniors to wrap up their collegiate career. And maybe an international bowl game doesn't sound too bad. Maybe you played in Canada, so it's not too far. Or you played in Mexico City. I don't know. But Ireland, I would say, is a clear front runner. Maybe London is another one up in the mix. Maybe you get Madrid, Spain. Maybe you get Berlin, Germany. Maybe Frankfurt. Just throwing a few ideas out there. Now, the question is, what do you name some of these bowl games? You know, the Lucky Charms Irish Bowl in Dublin, Ireland. That sounds pretty good if you ask me. So Kellogg's, we might get the Kellogg's Bowl for that because we got Tony the Tiger Bowl. Might as well make it the Lucky Charms Bowl out in Ireland. Sounds pretty good if you ask me. So definitely something that we could start looking into, and investing in for other teams to support that. I know we used to have the Lockheed Martin's Bowl, but maybe we could get the Airbus Bowl out in Europe. Other things, we could have the Guinness Bowl if Guinness wants to support the Ireland Bowl to get that off the ground. So there's companies out there that will kind of support and entertain this idea, but the logistics, getting the fans there, getting the student athletes there, getting all the equipment there, and right at the end of the season, and then you're trying to move in, you got 3 weeks time to get all that there, get all the team's equipment and all that stuff to do it. I wouldn't say it's a logistical nightmare, but we've done it. They've done it at the start for week 0. They've done it. And I don't know what else that they end up having to do for the most part to pull that off to make overseas bowl games possible. I don't think we're going to see it. Maybe later, maybe in the 2040s and the 2050s, that might become a thing. But the first things first, we got to fix the bowl games and the college football playoffs. That's the first things first before we start introducing international bowl games and more games being played overseas in the college game for the most part. Like I said, as we start winding down for tonight's program, thank you so much for supporting Gridiron Gridlock going into that. I know it's been a fantastic year for some, others not so much. But we truly appreciate it here on ETB and what you have put together over the years, us reaching over 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, to losing playback, changing from our watch lounges, but having more successful programming on top of that, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a fantastic 2025 here for ETB. We could only go up from here. Get us to more watch hours. We need 4,000 so we can start earning to get our shows more monetized, to help us get more exposure to you guys, better equipment for everyone, to get that experience and everything that comes with this program and network. So make sure you support us in that sense, ladies and gentlemen. I want to make sure we thank everyone at ETB, all the great stuff that we got going on for the most part. And it's been a very fantastic year, and we can't wait for 2026. And without further ado, let's do a quick recap of the games that we got going on. Texas is up now, ladies and gentlemen, 31-27 with about 5:30 left in the fourth. Utah has definitely had this in the bag, 44-14 in that sense, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you so much. We're excited. We are thrilled for 2026. Gridiron Gridlock will be showcased on next week for Thursday for the semifinal coverage to get that underway. And then we were going to start rolling back to our regular program between Saturdays, and then eventually we can bounce back and forth with women's college basketball and men's basketball as we ramp up towards March Madness. So Gridiron Gridlock will only get better from this point forward, ladies and gentlemen. So take care. Please be responsible and safe if you go out for New Year's. If you go out and have drinks, please make sure you have a designated driver. Use public transportation or get a Lyft or Uber. Or if not, stay at your friend's house and spend the night. It's no reason to be out drinking and driving. We want you to be safe. If we want you to be back to watch more episodes of Gridiron Gridlock as well as other ETV shows. Please have a safe and happy New Year, everyone, and we'll catch you on the other side. So long for now. Bye-bye.